you want to be attuned to the minor signals that are telling you, giving you wisdom, showing you, remember 3 trillion bits of information being processed?
Yeah.
You're processing it. The only way to get some of that information that you can't even consciously understand is to have a very finely calibrated and attuned body.
Yeah.
Your senses are trained. In Hebrews it says, your senses are trained through experience. I would say the experience has to be a conscious experience, though. So if you have the experience and you keep on doing the same old things, you're not going to be trained. You're just going to continue to reinforce your same old bad ways of experiencing life. Instead, you take those senses and you realize these senses are trained and modulated. You have this extreme ability to turn on and off, modulate, and make them stronger or less stronger, amplify them or minimize them, right? Or sometimes not see them at all, right? We have all these abilities to do that. So what you're trying to do is take all these senses coming in and then process them. And that's always the issue. Like for a young kid, how they develop those trauma ways, they learned that they weren't able to really consciously process what they were experiencing. It was too disruptive or intense. And so they stepped away, right? Well, now you got to undo that. Now I want to process this. I can't learn to process it if I don't feel it at all. So now I'm going to refill it. I'm going to process it differently. And that's where you develop emotional intelligence. Suddenly you're like, okay, how do I do this? It usually has a lot to do with self-acceptance. It's okay to feel these things. My body is not wrong. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. That's all okay. And as long if you keep on telling yourself, I'm okay, this is okay, I choose to feel this, over and over and over again, that you're starting to create a new way. Our states are layered. And so usually the primary state of feeling, like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, or I have this sensation on my skin that's very painful, or I need to breathe else I might die. All those things are just primary level. That's the first feeling you get. Then you have all these layered beliefs that make you respond further, and they take you somewhere totally different, right? And so like, oh, this is bad, I'm going to die, is different than, oh, this is exactly where I want to be, this is the feeling I should have, I would expect this right now. I'm going to notice it, learn from what I can. This is totally okay that I feel this way, even though it feels out of control. I'm okay not feeling out of control. I'm okay feeling this. I'm okay. When you say I'm okay, then suddenly you strip away all the higher level stuff where you're afraid about being afraid. There's levels of emotion and belief and emotion and belief and all these things. And suddenly you're in this very weird, complex, layered state that oftentimes is layered with trauma and all these other things, right?
So just like to simplify it, like for me, just so I can understand it. So doing the intentional like micro pain of Wim Hof or the ice bath just is like a Lego or like a building block to a building competency.
Yes.
To deal with. Okay.
You are building pain competency that will generalize.
For
what
everything.
you see, pain tends to generalize. So like I mentioned, like with PTSD, it's very common that you start with an initial experience. It's very limited. It's just like in a certain context, a certain thing happened. Suddenly you're in a totally different context. And what are some examples of stuff you've seen that would trigger that are totally have nothing to do with
crowds?
Did that have anything to do with your original experience of why you felt that?
No. Thunderstorms.
Yeah.
Crowds and thunderstorms primarily. Those are my main.
I think you said fireworks too.
Yes, I'm sorry. Forgot fireworks. Yep.
Yeah. And it's like, and rationally you know this, but this is something that's been trained in here. So you can't just instantly turn it off.
Right.
But the opportunity is that you find higher level ways of dealing with this, where you sit with the pain. You sit with it and you say, it's okay to feel this way. It's just fine. Whereas previously you probably said, this is stupid. I can't believe I'm feeling this. Like, oh, I feel like I'm gonna die. Like, and you're just like, you start accelerating by rejecting your own feelings. There's these studies on validation, where if somebody validates you, so see if you come to somebody and you say to them, hey, like you start complaining, like, like I'm so mad about so-and-so, and that person says, oh, that's kind of stupid, you shouldn't feel that, right? What do you think happens after someone invalidates you and says your emotions are not right?
What's wrong with me? You question it.
Does the emotion get stronger and get amplified, or get less?
Amplified.
Extremely so. Sometimes like the amplification of your overall sense of experience is double or triple.
Yeah.
And so the friend's trying to be helpful, because in reality, what they said was 100% right, and it's completely illogical that you felt that, right? Like you totally misread the situation. You're just angry about something else, but it feels like it's that, right? Or something like that. I mean, there's all these weird things we do, and the other person can see it like nothing. But they make the mistake in invalidating you and telling you that your feelings are not reasonable. from your body's perspective, the feelings are completely reasonable. Mentally, maybe not so much. And it's going to be hard for you to see that. But if you say, you know what, it's okay that you feel it. This is part of being human. You know, and you don't have to agree with somebody on the premise of the feeling to validate someone and say, I empathize with you. It's okay to feel this way. You know, even if it's like a 100% incorrect feeling, you know.
Is that the best way to? Because I'm scared because I run into situations like that.
Yeah.
Where someone's being a lot.
You need to find a way to accept them and make sure they understand it. And the big problem that most people have is that they think that they're going to be endorsing that person's underlying presuppositions by that are really not correct, and maybe even encouraging them to think more incorrect thoughts, right? And so at the end of the day, there is an art to it, and this is not a class on that, but there is an art to talking with someone in a way that makes them feel not crazy. Because in reality, do you know what it is to be gaslighted?
Yeah.
That means, right? And so they're feeling gaslighted because they have a real feeling that's theirs, and then you're saying they somehow don't or shouldn't or whatever. And as we're talking about layers upon layers of feeling, it adds that and is accelerating. So suddenly they're like, they're thinking maybe I shouldn't feel it, but yeah, I do, and you're wrong, and all these little things are just splitting them, causing them more of the issues of whatever trauma they've already experienced, more and more. And so being able to you have to find a way, working with people, to help them calm down and understand that you care about them. And then when they have calmed down, you can help them by asking questions about kind of what they were thinking, why it happened, when did it happen. That forces them into real clues that they see themselves. Because you telling them usually doesn't help.
Yeah. Right?
And so there is a whole process called Mind Lines, which I'd like to teach at some point, where there's 26 different perspectives you can guide through anybody on any belief they have. And generally, the good beliefs get much stronger because you see it from so many perspectives, and suddenly it shifts and create integration. And then you actually want to disintegration is not always bad, okay? Sometimes understanding disintegrates toxic ways of thinking. So you're trying to disintegrate and loosen and de-energize beliefs and ideas that don't serve people when you're working with them, right? And so that was all an aside regarding validation, okay? It's the power of validation. What you have to learn is realize that you're no different than anybody else in this regard. You need that validation. And part of learning to kind of self-heal, self-coach, is to learn to validate yourself. And it doesn't, again, mean that you agree with all your stupid presuppositions that really are stupid, okay? It's that you learn to say, I'm a human and it's okay to have the stupid presuppositions. It's okay. It's okay to feel this. And as soon as you accept it, a lot of the pressure, like the difference between gunpowder lit, if you just poured a pound of tame and light it, and compressed in something, what's the difference?
Combustion.
Well, they both combust.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, yes. Yes. You're going to have an explosive reaction where a bullet's going to fire. It's under pressure.
Yeah, and so there's a similar emotional thing that happens where when it comes to extreme emotions, all the thoughts that you layer on top create like a combustion chamber that causes a great deal of damage within you. It causes further issues. And I think our deepest need, let's just take from a relational perspective the same thing. Our deepest need is for someone to look at us in all of our crappiness and mess that we are and accept us 100% for who we are. That's what we desire. That is almost the definition of intimacy. That I can be vulnerable but not be hurt by somebody. I can be 100% naked in every way. And this person accepts me just like I am. That is what we get from God. And very few people do get it from God, but when it works, when our relationship with God is working, it's because we've experienced total and 100% acceptance. It's almost basically impossible for actually humans to do. We just can't, but we're trying to move there.
Sure.
We can provide that, right? And so there's that relational dynamic at work inside you, and you have pieces and parts too. They might not be real, but they certainly feel like it. They have these aspects. When you get divided especially, there's these pieces and parts. So what you're trying to do is say, to meld as one, a man and wife become one flesh, that idea. let's start with you being one flesh first, right?
Good point.
So you're instead of fighting about things or judging yourself, you're saying you're accepting it as it is. It is what it is. Yes, you're a mess. Okay, just accept it and be okay with it, right? Because nothing you do in terms of judging yourself is going to suddenly cause you to be a perfect person, right? And in fact, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to split you and cause you to, it's going to obfuscate or opaque. It's going to cause you to not be able to see it clearly and objectively. Instead, you say, it is what it is. Let's open up my consciousness to what is and understand. And then I can move slowly towards a better state. But if I reject it now, I won't even have the understanding or awareness of what's happening to move in a better direction with my life, right? It becomes too painful to even recognize if you constantly reject yourself, invalidate yourself, and cause that kind of combustible inner experience.
This might be a totally separate topic, but like, well, we talked about like, I guess for myself, because I was thinking about like if for other people, like how do you, obviously, basically what you said, that you feel like you're validating their incorrect presupposition, that feels, but like even for yourself, like if I do something and I find out, and I'm like, oh, I was totally wrong, that was very stupid, and like now I'm able to see it. But like, how do you move forward? Because all I'm thinking about is like, okay, I made this mistake.
Yeah.
And it's like,
there's this one mistake I made in my business, and I made it a number of times, and I'm like, oh no, this is such a stupid mistake, right? And it caused kind of a lot of issues for some of my employees. And I did finally fix it. I made some changes, but it had to do with something I felt like I really couldn't withdraw myself from, but I wasn't good at. And so I would forget, I would not do this, and it would just create these financial ramifications in the business. And I remember oh no, I did it again. This is such a big, and you're just feeling like,
yeah.
And part of me not doing that was me saying, you know what, it is what it is, I did it, and that's okay. But the point is that I had this experience, and I wasn't good at it, and it really seemed kind of ridiculous to me. I judged myself. But I had to get past that and say, it's okay, Andy. Obviously you're struggling with something, you can't do this, you feel not good at it. And I was able to kind of figure out a way to offboard it off my plate to let somebody else while I still was able to do what I needed to do, right? For some reason I wasn't able to do that for like a year plus of having this issue because of just the overwhelming feelings around that area. I couldn't objectively find a solution while I dealt with also me judging myself. It was too overwhelming. I was split off from it. So you can't play with something. Play is really a big part of thinking I'd like to get to. Playing has all these benefits. Play in so many different ways. We learn to play as a kid, but really that's you learning to work. And so being able to play, make believe, imagination, play with things, play with ideas, fiddle with them, look at them, think from different angles, all this stuff, it doesn't happen when you're just like intensely in an intense state of self-hatred.
It's true.
That's not play, right? And so learning that it's just kind of like female sexual response. There's like 10 doors of emotionality before they can actually experience pleasure, right? For men, we have those same 10 doors, we just never notice them. But it's true, our sexuality is not that different, we just experience it differently, it looks different, but it's all the same stuff. So like, for the things you want, the places you want to be, oftentimes there's these doors you walk through, and you never realize you're 10 doors down. You have to go through 10 things to get there, and you're over here. So emotionally speaking, you have to start to recognize that I can't just jump like through 10 rooms and be over here in this house. Like, I can't just like be at a level here and not use the stairs to get to the next level. My legs aren't that big. There's a reason we have stairs in houses, right? Because it takes 12 steps to get up, right? And so we step one stair at a time. And it's the same thing emotionally. You have to realize what your stairs are, where the rooms are, where you are in the house. It's really a different place. It's not like, oh, I just need to magically transport myself over here. I have to walk through time and space to get here. And that's decision making, choosing to accept myself as I am, realizing for me as a Christian, God accepts me as I am. He met me exactly where I was, and that's why I can grow so much. I realize for the recording, not everybody is 100% on board with that, but I think the principle is that like you should accept yourself because you really don't have any choice. You are what you are. You're already there. Like what difference is it going to make not to accept yourself? Is it going to transport you into an elevated state? No. The very opposite. It's going to cause a kind of disruptive, a stigmatization, kind of a sticking point where you can't move forward.
Create a ceiling.
You can't play. Yeah. You can't visualize. You can't see a way to a better path.
Right.
While you're stuck and split and all this stuff, And so it always starts with self-acceptance. Self-acceptance is the number one thing. If we have time, we'll get to emotional freedom techniques. And a big part of that is using body focus, where you stimulate your body,
Yes.
tapping different points that relax you and make you notice. And then you start talking to yourself about accepting specific things. I accept that this is true. It is. Why cut yourself off from that reality? By making it too painful. And then once you see objectively, oftentimes, your brain is really amazing. If you can just see something clearly, oftentimes it will totally change. There's things like neurofeedback, where your brain can reorganize itself in an instant once it gets the proper feedback in. So like the difference between a genius piano player and a not good piano player is their ear, and they can hear the feedback, okay? And it's the same with your brain. If you can't hear the feedback, if you can't experience all of the sensations, because it's too painful, say, then it will not change. But you can literally have people just to understand something, they hear just a little bit better, and boom, the brain changes and they become a much better at whatever they do. And it's natural, it's just the way that we learn. Better feedback equals better results.
What does that mean exactly? Because like for me, like there's things about myself that I would like to change. I mean like positive, just grow in like areas that I would like to progress in, and I don't feel like I'm at a point I want to be at. What is like self-acceptance versus being just like oh, I have
Being
problems,
okay with being crappy, is that what you're saying?
That's a good question.
Yeah, no, and that's a big people's concern.
Yeah.
And really what it is, it represents a belief that you need to get over, okay? So it makes total sense. I'm gonna validate your emotions on that, okay? You're okay. It's okay to feel this way, okay? And, I'm not gonna say but I will say and, okay? And that belief that I need to feel bad about something to be motivated to change is exactly unhelpful. You think, and I've said things to myself, so I totally get it. I've thought to myself, man, if I don't feel guilty about this, if I don't feel whatever else, that's not accepting, I won't be able to change. I just won't, right? And it turns out that not accepting yourself keeps you from having the imagination about where you want to go that's going to bring you there, right? Because then you're fixated on what's not working versus what you hope to work in the future. And so from a Christian perspective in the Bible, God talks about grace. He talks about people that are judgmental and are totally and completely focused on what they do. And he says, you can't get to where you want to go by only doing that. You can't work your way here, right? Instead, Jesus said there's 2 commandments and everything else is fulfilled by these 2. Or actually 1, the second is fulfilled, automatically happens after the first, and then the rest happen from there, right? Mm-hmm. He said, love me, and he said, love your neighbor, okay? And so this is the gospel of grace. It turns everything on its hand. It used to be like, oh, I have to do something to get here. Instead, like, no, I'm going to be here now, and everything I do is going to happen automatically because I'm there, right? And so what you're saying is, I need to beat myself to get there, and I need to dissect myself and all these other things. And God, from a religious perspective, doing some of the hardest things there are, which is to live holy, he says, no, I'm going to make you holy instant. And now that you are, everything else will end up being fulfilled. It's not that you don't do those things, it's that you couldn't until you are already there. And so it became kind of a chicken and egg scenario, which is going to happen first, right? And so you look at that same thing where you're saying, well, I need to not accept myself so I can grow. No, you need to accept yourself so you can grow. It's exactly the opposite, you know.
It's interesting.
Not accept yourself definitely puts you in that category of not being there yet. I don't accept myself. I'm not good enough, right? And God says, no, I accept you exactly as you are, and I call you in another state. I identify you as another person, right? And guess what? What's the primary symbol that you do then? He says, you die with me so you can live, right? Unless a seed drops in the ground and dies, you cannot, it cannot grow into a tree. So a lot of this is saying, you know what, my ego says I need to hurt myself, to self-flagellate, do all this. You're giving up on all that. There's nothing you can do. So just accept it. And that's only when you can do it, right? Like, you get that power. And I will say that's throughout life. Part of even the reason why we go for the pain therapy is dying to self. It's saying, you know what, I am going to die. Like, I kind of feel like I'm dying when I feel this, I'm going to put myself in this position. And guess what? When you stress yourself out, did you know in addition to all these things we were talking about in terms of connecting with pain and trying to connect ourselves, it does all sorts of things to make your brain ready to learn, because naturally you can imagine when you need to learn most when you're in pain, right? And so you put yourself in that situation and suddenly your brain activates with like things like BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Stress actually makes you ready to connect with people, because when else would you need to connect with people most? When you need help, right?
Yeah.
So stress, you can go both ways. You can become less social, but if you realize you're actually activated to be more social and you seek help, that's a big part of connecting. Like, you can, inner disconnections also force you to disconnect from other people. If you want to heal, you've got to fix the issues with people simultaneously with fixing the issues with yourself. Both of those things go together. And then you can make the case for a kind of social brain, where there's very complicated feedback with other people, and if you're trying to grow awareness, a lot of that comes from other people looking back on you, and you getting either just very minor facial feedback about what you should and shouldn't do, how things are perceived and all that. It changes you fundamentally. It makes you a better person if you're hanging out with the right people. It does anyways. But yeah, there's whole parts of your brain that are only dedicated to mimicking and understanding people's unconscious behaviors that you're not even conscious of. And you literally start to become like the people around you. They say, if you want to be something, you can figure you're pretty much going to be like the 5 closest people in your life in the next 5 to 10 years. But there's actually this brain cells dedicated 100% to mirroring people and understanding them.
That's interesting.
Fascinating topic here.
Yes. So, anyways, a lot happens during this. But let's go ahead and start now. So, all right. Is the video and sound still working?
Yeah, it says 40 minutes on that.
Oh.
On that one.
All right.
This one.
So I'm going to get a timer out, okay? And so for everybody that hasn't done it, including in the recording, I'm going to guide us through, and you can just listen to the recording if you're listening to the recording. But I'm going to explain it first.